Hello everyone. Now you will hear a short summary of the film, Robin Hood. Enjoy watching. Nottingham, England, 1199. Lord Locksley's estate has been robbed by forest bandits and all his grain has been taken. Now the peasants are in danger of starvation. Robert Locksley himself, together with King Richard I, returns home after a 10-year crusade. On the way back, the English capture French castles, and this castle was to be their last. The army has a skilled marksman, Robin Longstrike. Richard the Lionheart rides ahead of his army. The French pour boiling oil on the enemy and shoot from bows. But the main gates have been set on fire. All that remains is to wait until they burn out completely and not let the French put them out. Meanwhile, the king's younger brother, John, has thrown his wife out of bed to have sex with the French Countess Isabella. The King of France is planning to bring his niece home, and now he has a pretext to attack England. Richard has no heirs, so John will become king and Isabella will become Queen of England when he dissolves his first marriage. Richard waits for the fortress gates to burn out. There will be an assault in the morning, and then he can go home. The king does not like his brother and is going to lock him up in prison. The king hid his face under a hood to secretly watch what his soldiers were doing. A fight broke out between Robin and Little John, and Richard was hit in the head with both feet. The king was not offended and wanted to know what the brave warrior thought of their campaign. Robin replied that God had turned away from them when they rounded up 2,500 Muslims and massacred them, mercilessly executing both women and children. Robin's honesty cost all his friends the price. They were put in stocks. Robin swore that he would serve no one from now on. That same morning, the English Lord Sir Godfrey met with the French King Philip. He offered the traitor a generous reward for killing the king. With John on the throne, it would be much easier to take over England. In the morning, the English stormed the castle again. An enemy crossbowman made an accurate shot and the bolt flew straight into the king's neck. Richard was mortally wounded and died a few seconds later. Upon learning that the king had died, Robin and his comrades decided to flee, without any hope of release or payment of wages. Godfrey set up an ambush and slaughtered all the English knights, including Richard the Lionheart. Godfrey was pleasantly surprised to learn that he had been forestalled. The seriously wounded Robert Locksley said that they were carrying the king's crown to London. The horse with the crown galloped off into the forest. Robin's troop stopped it and killed the French who were pursuing the horse. Then the English found the rest of the enemy and shot them with bows. Robin's arrow also caught Godfrey, but only wounded his face. Dying, Robert of Locksley asked Robin to take his sword to Nottingham and give it to his father. Robin found a map. The detachment was supposed to gallop to the coast, board a ship and deliver the crown to the Tower. This is how simple archers would return to their homeland. They would put on armor and pretend to be knights, and then start a new life in England. Marion Locksley hopes the church will share grain with the needy, but the previous pastor only laughed and advised the peasants to pray for their sins. In his place came the good-natured monk Tuck. Robin's company galloped up to the ship. The archer introduced himself as Sir Robert Locksley and reported the king's death. The delighted deserters got drunk and celebrated their return home. They had intended to flee as soon as they touched the shores of England, but they overslept and woke up when the ship was already sailing down the Thames. The Queen came out to greet her son. No one yet knows that King Richard I was killed. The simple warrior Robin bowed and handed the crown to the Queen. The woman immediately placed it on the head of her youngest son. The subjects knelt before the new king. Although the night brought sad news, John decided to reward the impostor with his ring. However, he immediately changed his mind when he remembered that his father, Walter Locksley, owed the crown a tax. John greeted his best friend Godfrey and noticed his wound. The traitor ordered his man to finish off Robin. Marion has plowed the field, but all they can hope for is nettles and dandelions. The sheriff has come galloping to collect taxes, but Marion has nothing to give. First they were robbed to pay for military campaigns, and the rest was taken by the church. The scoundrel would like to marry Marion. Her husband has been missing on campaigns for 10 years, most likely already dead, and he is here and can provide protection. Robin divided the spoils and suggested that his comrades scatter. He would go to Nottingham to fulfill his promise and hand over the sword. The kingdom's treasury is empty. John has ordered the army to be disbanded and taxes to be raised. William Marshall has suggested taking loans from merchants instead, but the king believes that the northern barons are lying about their dire straits and that gold can still be squeezed out of them. Godfrey immediately offered his service. The barons would have to choose between gold or the grave. The marshal was against this idea, and John dismissed the marshal so that he would not interfere with his lawlessness in the kingdom. Godfrey went to replenish the treasury, using the most cruel and merciless methods. The companions followed Robin and rode to Nottingham. The first person they met was Friar Tuck, who had also become a beekeeper and also sold mead. Robin mistook Marian for a peasant woman and asked where he could find Walter Locksley. He wanted to give him Robert's sword. That's how the woman learned that her husband had been killed. Robin soon realized that he was talking to the mistress of the estate. The archer handed the sword to Walter. Robert's father had forbidden him to go on a campaign. Now the prodigal son would not even be able to ask his father for forgiveness. The blind old man invited the guest to dine with them, but only after he washed up. Marian had to help Robin undress, because he himself would not be able to take off his chainmail. The woman does not like their guest. She considers him a swindler, but the cunning Walter suggested that Robin pretend to be his son and Marian's husband. The fact is that after his death, Marian will end up on the street, because he has no other heirs and the estate will be immediately taken away. To deceive the servants, Robin will need to sleep in Marian's bedroom. Marian warned him that she had a dagger and that he should stay away from her. The archer lay down on the floor by the fireplace next to the dog. 200 French soldiers landed on the coast of England and were met by Godfrey. William Marshall learned about this through his spy. Walter's spirits are lifted. Robin wins the old man's trust. From Marian the guest learns that they have no cattle, and that they can only hunt rabbits. All deer are considered the property of the king. Apparently no one remembers what Robert looked like, because everyone greets Robin as their lord. His comrades in arms must now also address him as Sir. The bishop ordered the last of the peasants' grain to be taken away. Robin conspired with Tuck. He told him the route along which the confiscated grain would be transported. Robin's troop set up an ambush on the road and knocked out the guards. Thus the grain returned to the Locksley estate. That same morning, they sowed the prepared fields with it, and when the shoots appeared, Brother Tuck declared it a miracle. This is how Robin earned Marian's favor. Using French troops, Godfrey began to rob the barons, and he does this in the name of John. The cutthroats kill the inhabitants and even plunder the churches. The marshal told of the plot of the king's mother. When the barons of the north rebel against the crown, the coast will be open to invasion. The queen mother decided to influence her son through Isabella. If she wanted to become queen, she had to save John and England. The young king was furious when he learned of Godfrey's betrayal. The sheriff has received notice that tax collectors will soon be arriving in Nottingham. The scoundrel will be happy to oblige Godfrey, but he may be thwarted by the crusader Robert Locksley, who has returned from the war. Robin and Marian spend more and more time together, and feelings begin to develop between them. John turns to the marshal for help. The knight advises the king to meet with the barons and calm them down, but the fool believes that all the militiamen should be put on pikes since they have gone against the crown. Godfrey found out where the man who had taken his crown was hiding. He ordered Nottingham and its inhabitants to be burned. The traitor also sent a letter to Philip, and it was time to attack England. Walter knew Robin's father. He was executed for drafting the Magna Carta, a document that was intended to limit the king's power and secure the rights of free citizens. A messenger galloped in and reported the rebellion of the barons. Robert Locksley was offered to join them. A large army had gathered in the city of Barnesdale. The marshal was trying to dissuade the barons from going to war with the king, because they were threatened by an external enemy. Suddenly, the king himself galloped in. He realized the seriousness of the situation, but now he needed to somehow come to an agreement with the rebellious barons. It was here that Robin's father was executed. He interrupted the dispute between the king and the barons and told John that he must give his subjects freedom. Justice would be secured by a charter of liberties. By renouncing tyranny, the king would gain not only the loyalty but also the love of the people. John gave his word that such a charter would appear. But first they had to repel the French attack. At the same time, Godfrey and his thugs attacked Nottingham. The sheriff greeted the invaders with joy, but his house was also burned. Walter came out to Godfrey and learned that his son's murderer was standing before him. The scoundrel mocked the blind old man for some time until he wounded him, then Godfrey immediately killed Walter. The beekeeper, Brother Tuck, threw a couple of hives to the French and locked the door. Assistant Godfrey pushed Marion into the house and told her to relax. Marion took out a hidden dagger and plunged it into the bald killer. The forest bandits helped her get out. At the same time, the French drove all the inhabitants into a large house and set it on fire. Robin came to the rescue with a small army. He flew into the village and began to mow down the enemies. Marion and Tuck saved the peasants. The surviving French were forced to surrender. Marion learned of Walter's death and gave his sword to Robin. She had to see the man off to war again. As he was leaving, Robin confessed his love to the woman. The French fleet approaches the shores of England. Philip sees the fires lit by Godfrey and orders his troops to prepare for landing. At the same time, John rode ahead of the English army. After all, this was his first war. The enemy ships moored to the shore. Seeing how many French were ahead, the king got scared and turned to Robin for advice. He immediately took command. Philip and Godfrey did not expect the English to unite and assemble a full-fledged army. Archers lined up on the cliff and fired the first volley. The French infantry thinned out noticeably. Even Marion galloped up to fight the enemy in the company of forest bandits. Robin successfully leads the cavalry. Inspired by the success of his army, the young king also rushed into battle. Marion saw the bald traitor and knocked him off his horse, but she also ended up on the ground. Robin saved her at the last moment. However, during the battle the man was almost crushed by 2 ships. Godfrey took advantage of this and tried to escape on a horse. However, Robin fired an arrow, which hit the target and pierced the villain's neck. At the last moment, the archer managed to save Marion, who was pulled under the water by heavy armor. Philip realized that he had miscalculated and ordered a retreat. John was delighted, but saw that the army was not honoring him, but the commoner Robin. When the threat had passed, the vile king refused to sign the charter. He burned it in front of the barons. John called Robin a robber and an impostor, deserving only execution. He would be persecuted until death. The sheriff of Nottingham declared that Robin Hood was now an enemy of the crown, as were all his friends. But the hero was not afraid. Together with Marion, he went to live in Sherwood Forest and became the leader of young robbers.